Hello, Bravs. We're back with The Wandering Heir, a Christmas story by Charles Reade from 1872, a book which, in my handling, is now falling into tatters. But we'll continue, and hopefully it survives this reading. Chapter 4, which I will break into two parts. James Annersley remained in prison, awaiting his sentence. He was not without hope, but his fear was greater, and this fear soon rose to agony, for the unhappy pair, whose kindness had brought him to this, were let out to receive the first part of their sentence. Within sight of the grated windows of his cell, they had to sit under the gallows 1 hour with a rope around their necks, and then received the lover 40 lashes, and the woman 30, and the servant 21, all on their bare backs, and well laid on. Their groans and shrieks rent the air, and froze James Annesley to the bone, for he looked for his own turn to come next, and behind the cutting lash frowned the grim prison. A week passed, and a spark of hope was reviving when one morning the jailer and another officer came and told him he must go with them. His knees failed him, he groaned and lay back almost insensible. They gave him a drop of brandy, and seeing his mistake, told him to pluck up courage. You are to be exposed every market day, and not to be whipped, till somebody in Chester shall prove you were in the town before you came in a prisoner. He was so exposed every market day for a month. A large paper was pinned on his breast, inviting all good citizens to testify what they knew of him. On the fourth market day, casting his eyes wistfully round, who should he see but Drummond? He had come all the way to buy horses and was so intent on business that he noticed nothing else. James made signs to him. In vain, he called to him. He did everything to attract his cruel master's attention, whom he had run from. At last, a man went for him to Drummond and brought him up. Drummond started at first and then surveyed him with a cruel countenance. What would you of me, young man? Do but take me home, and I will serve you faithfully. Drummond, to torment him, turned on his heel without a word. However, he went to the justices and claimed him, showed by an entry in his pocketbook when he ran away, and from what place, and knocked the indictment to atoms. In 24 hours, James Annesley was riding home at Drummond's back. When he got him home, Drummond sued him for penalties of damages. The penalty, 5 days for every day's absence, came to a year, but the damages being paid in service came to 2 years and a half. Upon this decision, James Annesley began to fret and pine away, and Drummond, who had lost 1 or 2 that way, sold him to Jedediah Surefoot, a flourishing planter near Willington in Delaware. This was a beautiful place and had an extraordinary story, which was then fresh in men's minds. William Shipley, a Leicestershire man, was settled at Ridley, with his second wife, Elizabeth Levis of Springfield in the county Chester. She was a distinguished minister in the Society of Friends, and a remarkable woman. Soon after her marriage, she dreamed a dream. She was riding through a wild country, on what errand she knew not, and mounted a lofty hill. From this hill burst on her eyes a landscape of surpassing beauty, a wide valley green with sloping lawns, studded with clumps of trees and settlers' cabins. The sun streamed golden through partial clearings made by the axe. Even now it tinkled unseen, and broad rivers ran, and little brooks sparked silver, and meandered to the extreme limits of vision. She sat entranced upon her horse, and was speechless a while with delight. Then she asked her guide what country this was. Elizabeth, said he, it is thy home. Nay, said she, my earthly home is Ridley. Not so, said he. This sweet place cries out for thee and for the word. Submit thyself then to the will of heaven, and come hither. So shalt thou do much good to the place and the people, and the blessing of God shall be on thy house and on their labors in the Lord. Elizabeth told this dream to her husband with all the warmth and freshness in the world, and he made this sublime answer: "We are doing pretty well here," and the subject dropped. Full 3 years afterwards, Elizabeth Shipley was invited to a meeting of friends between the Delaware and Chesapeake Bays. She rode alone and without fear till she came to the Brandywine River, and then, though the water was low, she took a guide. He led her some distance to the old fort, and she got through and went up to the hill by the King's Road. At the top of the hill, she checked her horse and uttered a cry of amazement and delight. For lo, there was a paradise of her dream before her, down to the minutest feature of the landscape, and the axe that tinkled unseen. She sat like a statue on her horse, just as she had done in her dream. After this, she constantly entreated William Shipley to ride with her and see the lovely place. He thought of the waste of time, did not believe in dreams, though he durst not say. So at least she said to him, "William, settle all thou hast in Ridley on thy children by thy first wife. I and mine will stand or fall by the place the Lord doth call me to." The prophetess knew her lord and master. He came with her directly to see Willingtown, and it struck him all of a heap. He examined it nearer, and found it was seated between the finger and thumb of two rivers, one impetuous and admirable for turning mills, the other tidal and navigable to the sea. "Why," Elizabeth said, "a man might grind his corn here with one hand, and ship it with the other." So, what with her faith and power divine, and I can't turn the page, and his water power, the Shipleys settled at Willingtown, now called Wilmington, and gave that rising place a wonderful impulse. William Shipley bought land between the streams and set up mill and factory. Elizabeth became a shining light and drew the cream of the Quakers thither, and even poor James Annesley profited a little by her virtues. For she preached and practiced humanity to slaves, and Dame Surefoot, a simple motherly woman, was her pupil, though her senior, so there was no starving of slaves, nor frolicsome flagellation on Surefoot's farm. Servitude was robbed of its fangs, though nothing could remove its sting in the circle of which that pious woman was the center. But the beauty of the place and the milder servitude came too late for poor James Annesley. The long persecution of fortune, the almost intermittent sufferings of his soul and body, had broken his spirit and clouded his youth. He was worn out, dejected, hopeless. His mind might be compared to a ship which had been so tossed, baffled, and battered by storm upon storm, that at last it leaks and sinks quietly in the golden ripple and placid sunlight of a calm. He did his work well enough, but in dogged silence, and nothing ever came from him but sighs. His face was handsome, but full of misery. Dame Surefoot noticed this after a time, and asked him one day what was the matter. "Nothing, madam," said he. "Thank you." "Then why so sad?" "Most servants are glad to come to us from Drummond." "And so ought I to be, madam. I will try to be more cheerful. But 3 years more," and he groaned. "What is 3 years?" said Mrs. Surefoot. "Alas, young man, 'twill pass like a shadow. You have got this new trouble, the vapors, with keeping too much alone. I shall find you a companion, for you are a civil-spoken young man." So that very evening she went to her favorite, when could any woman govern without one? The hell does that mean? "Philip," said she, "prithee speak to this new servant James, and be good to him. He is well to look at, and no idler, but so eaten up with sadness." "Mayhap he is in love," said Philip. "I'll soon find what ails him, mother." This Philip was a black-eyed youth, as sharp as a needle, who kept all the accounts and sometimes rode on business. He flattered the mistress finely, and had got the length of her shoe, as the saying is. And I just lost it. Son of a bitch. And got the length of her shoe, as the saying is. The master valued him on other grounds. He was saucy but honest and kept the books, though rather complicated, with marvelous precision and neatness. Thus valued on both sides, Philip, who, by the by, was older than he looked, gave himself considerable airs. And it was in rather a condescending tone he danced up to James Annesley and invited him to leave off sighing and walk with him into the town of Willington. "Thank you, sir," said James, "but I prefer to meditate." "To mope, you mean. 'Tis the worst thing for you." "And I hate to walk alone, so be not churlish now. Why, man, we are countrymen. Sir, I shall be sorry company, but I shall be merry company, so come on." "Well, if I must," said James, and went with him, reluctantly. Master Philip chattered away for both, and stole a glance at his companion now and then. Young Annesley's replies were civil, but reserved. "You are no milk-clack," said Philip, ironically. "I am not," said James, humbly. Philip carried an enormous basket. He had to bring groceries home, and salt, and medicinal herbs from Mrs. Dean, the Dutch widow, and coarse sugar, and a jar of vinegar. When all these were on board, the basket was very heavy, and James said, "I will carry that." "Nay," said Philip, pretending to resist. "I carried it hither, and I will carry it home." "That you shall not," said James, and laid hold of it, and fairly wrenched it from him. "You are a rude bear," said Philip. "You have hurt my thumb." "Where?" asked James, catching at it to see. "Somewhere," said Philip, and whipped it behind his back. "Well, I'm sorry for that," replied James. "I am much older than you and stronger, and the least I could do was to carry your burden, since you put up with my company." "Speak not to me. I'll never speak to you again, bear. And what else am I good for now, but to carry burdens?" "Oh, say not that, James. Alas, why are you so sad? You are young. You are well looking, rather. What beautiful hair you have got. I declare I did never see such hair. 'Tis like silk. I never despond. If I had such hair as that, instead of my black stuff. You should flatter the women. That is the way to get forward. Look at me. I get my own way in everything, and that is my strategy. Tell me, James. I won't tell a soul. Are you in love?" "No." "But you have been." "Never. I was but a boy when I was kidnapped and sent over here, and my heart has always been too heavy for those idle fancies." "What, you did not come here of your good will? Consent to be a slave? Who would be so base?" James said this with a certain majesty that quelled his merry companion for a moment. He drew instinctively a little farther off, and walked with thoughtful, downcast eyes. Nor did he say much more, in fact, but brooded over what his companion had said. However, he chattered away fast enough to Mrs. Surefoot, and they agreed that James was not a sullen churl, but a fine, melancholy, interesting young man. Then they fell into speculation as to why he had been kidnapped and sent out. This wise conversation was uttered within hearing of Maria Surefoot, a demure, romantic girl of 17. She drank in every word, but said nothing. Only thenceforth James became an object of vast curiosity and interest to her. One day, that some very heavy work in loading of timber was done near the house. James was very zealous and active, and so athletic that Philip drew Mrs. Surefoot's attention to his prowess. "Yes, in truth," said the worthy dame. "Here, Maria, on you? Must be a missing letter there. Maria, something you, and get him a can of wine, and take it to him. He has earned it right well." Maria soon appeared with the can, and went to James. He was now seated on a bank in sight, and the brief stimulus of labor over, had fallen into his usual pensive state. The girl approached him timidly and softly, and stood looking at him for a considerable time. "Is she afraid to speak to him?" said Philip pettishly. "What should she be afraid of?" said Mrs. Surefoot. The girl spoke to James, and he instantly rose and removed his cap. She held him out the wine, blushing like a rose, and said, "Prithee drink this, my mother sends it." "I wish her every blessing," said James piously, "and the same to you, Mistress Maria." You cannot wish me better than I wish you, James, murmured the girl, all in a flutter. I have heard about you, and if there is anything in the world I can do, for I pity you with all my heart. She turned and went away in a tremor and confusion which did not escape the keen gray eyes of Master Philip. Dame Surefoot was older, so perhaps her eyes could not seize all the minutiae by which a girl's very body indicates when love has seized her. The coast was no sooner clear than Philip ran out and invited James into his office. It is cooler there, said he. As soon as ever he got James into his office, he said sharply, What did Mistress Maria say to you? I could not say. I paid no attention. I liked not that young gentlewoman. She is a forward minx. Is she? You know best. You have been here longest. How cool it is here, and you have flowers in your window. What a luxurious boy, and what a many books. Yes, I am the only one that reads much here, so our dame lets me have all the library. Are you fond of learning? I love it, of all things, but alas, I have been so ill brought up, and whenever I got to my books, some cruelty or other came and took me from them. It is my grief and my shame that I, a gentleman's son, have the education of a porter. What then? Said Philip. Tell me. If I were to teach you, would that make you happier and leave off sighing so? Indeed, I think it would. I burn with the desire of instruction. Well, then I will give you a lesson every evening. Then you will be out of the way of all these forward minxes. I trouble not my head about them. I would liever be at the books with you. Let us begin at once. Then Philip gave James a book to read, and he read it but badly, gave him a letter to write, and he wrote it vilely. Come, said Philip, with a curious air of satisfaction, I have a year's work before me with thee. He taught James every evening after work with a patience and an untiring amiability that he had not shown in conversation, and James plowed at it with all his heart and was pathetically docile and grateful. Out of this arose by degrees a tender friendship and loyal partisanship that belongs to youth, and so one day, being now such friends, Philip urged him by their friendship to tell him his whole story. He hesitated. Philip, said he, I never told it yet, but some ill luck did follow straight. No matter, sit by me, my one friend, and I'll tell it thee. Ever since I was 4 years old. Then he told his story, but broke down once or twice, then went manfully on, the more so that while he was telling it, a brown but shapely hand stole into his, and was seldom idle, but ever speaking as variously as a voice, with its gentle pressure of sympathy and sudden grasps at danger. But when he came to his being kidnapped and swooning dead away in the ship, it trembled, and Philip turned his head away and never looked towards him again. And by then he was flung into gaol and cast for death. The narrator discovered that Philip was crying. Oh, Philip, said he, do not cry. How many a time I have cried over it all, but now my eyes are dry. Sweet Philip, how kind you are to cry for me. Ah, miserable me. And all of a sudden, Philip's tears drew forth his own once more. The first he had shed for years. They did him a world of good. Oh, my dear Philip, he cried, you have saved me from despair. A cloud clears from my mind, whilst I have one friend who will shed a tear for me. It were ungrateful to despair. And he took Philip in his arms and was going to kiss him heartily, but the boy panted and put up both his hands and said, No, no, I am choking. Prithee, go get me a cup of wine. James went accordingly, and the first person he saw was Mistress Maria. He asked her to oblige him with a cup of wine. That I will, James, said she tenderly, and brought it him in a moment, and told him she must have the pleasure of seeing him drink. I will taste it, madam, said he, but indeed 'tis for Philip. He is not well. For Philip? She said disdainfully. I hope the next time 'twill be for yourself. James ran with the cup to Philip. Philip was not to be found. Was ever such a boy, said James. However, he left the cup of wine on the table, and the early negroes picked up that worm, as the saying is. Next evening he went for his lesson as usual. Philip was busy over a ledger, and only noticed him with a supercilious nod. Philip, said he, I brought you the wine as fast as I could. Philip never looked off his ledger. You brought it so fast that I was gone to bed. You were too busy with Mistress Maria to think of me, I trow. Nay, I did stay not 2 minutes with her. There. I thought as much. You were with her. Foolish boy. Have I the key of the cellar? I asked the first I met. Well, I guess she was the butler, so I did not drink a drop. Not a drop, sir. I am sorry for that. No, you are not. Yes, I am, Philip. Do not contradict me. I am very angry with you. You made me cry with your romance that I do not believe a word of. Do not contradict me. And I am not so fond of crying as you are. It makes me ill. And so now I'll just give you a piece of advice. For I see everything from this window. My nose may be in my ledger, but my eye is on you all. So tremble. I tell thee, young women are the artfulest creatures. They are not like men, who get gray and cunning. Girls are born artful, and 2 or 3 of these girls are setting their caps at you after their manner. There's that Indian girl, Turquoise. She makes no disguise being a savage. She lets all the world see she is ready to eat you up. Then there's the master's niece, great fat thing. She comes here 6 times for once she is wanted, and sits watching you with her great gray eyes like a cat watches for a mouse. She will catch you too, some day, if you take not the better heed. And then there's Mistress Maria. That is the worst of them all, because she is always here and has so many opportunities. She is ever throwing herself in your way. Nay, said James. Do you not meet her in lonely places whenever you take your walks without me? Sometimes by pure chance. Chance, foolish man, that shows how little you are fit to cope with them. Very well, Philip, said James. Since you give me the benefit of your age and experience, I'll give you a piece of advice. Do not trouble about me, for I am not in love with any young woman, and never was. What I love is the liberty I have lost in the country I have been banished from. Love is not for a slave. If ever I get home again, I may fall in love, but I think it will be a dark woman. They have always been my best friends. So never you mind me. 'Tis you that are in danger from these girls, not I. Me, ha ha! Why, your head is full of them. I never knew a boy of your age talk so much about women, nor think so much about them. Do I talk as if I love them? No, but you do study them and abuse them beyond reason, and those are the men that are caught the first, I've heard. Well, this is idle chat. Come sit down, and I'll give you your lesson, James. Now then, how dark is your sweetheart to be? Copper like turquoise, or lamp black like Chloe? Thank you, Philip. I prefer a white skin, but her hair and her eyebrows and her eyes, I care not if they are dark as the devil's, suggested Philip. Nay, yours will be dark enough for me. They are the blackest ever I saw. Long life to 'em. Philip colored high with pleasure, and then said with arrogance, Come, sir, this is idle chat. Let us to something more profitable, if you please. The snub scholar submitted with a smile. He was getting used to Master Philip's caprices. They amused him. James Annesley's spirits improved. His fine eyes began to beam at times, and color to come into his cheek. Mistress Maria, on the contrary, began to sicken and pine, and the vigilant Philip determined to be her doctor and prescribe her change of air. One morning he asked an interview with the master and mistress. They were breakfasting in the parlor. Philip was admitted. Now Jedediah Surefoot was not like his wife, who treated her servants as her children. He was humane, but very short with them. Philip stood in awe of him, and had prepared a little speech beforehand. Master, said he, I think a good servant should tell his employer in time if he sees anything going on that might take an ill turn. So I am come to tell you something. Then why not tell it at once, said Jedediah. Nay, sir, only for fear you should be hasty and blame him who is guiltless in the matter. The truth is, master, and I hope you will forgive me, and set it down to my zeal and duty, if I do make so free. But it is about my young mistress. Said Jedediah, frowning, and what canst thou have to say about her? She is sick, sir, and will be while she bides here. Why, the air is wholesome enough. I never was better in my life than I am here. 'Tis not the air that is amiss, sir, saving your presence. 'Tis the mind. Speak plainer then, jackanapes. If thou hast aught to say at all. Nay, then, Mistress Maria hath cast her eyes on James Annesley, and 'tis for him she is lovesick. Would you cure her? 'Tis but to send her elsewhere for a year. Change and the sight of other men will soon restore her. Jebediah was taken all aback by this revelation. Patience, said he. Can this be so? Nay, Jebediah, said she, I hope not, but Philip is not one that lies. Alas, what is to be done? The first thing to be done is to know the truth. He called a negro and bade him clear the room and bring an easy chair into it. This done, he sent the negro to his daughter's room and ordered her to come and sit in his armchair by the fire. When he heard her step on the stairs, he turned his wife and Philip out by another door, for the room had two, and left that door ajar. Now bide you there, said he, and still as mice. And we shall stop there, since the chapter is approximately half over, and resume it next time as the book falls apart, because I have destroyed it now somehow. All right, goodbye, bros. Goodbye.